was destined to change the course of history. Her name was Eleanor of Aquitaine, a force of nature whose influence spanned across two of the most powerful kingdoms of the 12th century. It was a time when land was power, and rulers were bound by their territories. But Eleanor was no mere ruler. She became a queen not once, but twice, first of France and then of England. Few women, or men for that matter, ever held sway over so much in a world dominated by kings and feudal lords. Hers was a life of ambition, love, betrayal, and triumph. In the 12th century, Europe was a place of rigid feudalism, where political power lay in vast tracts of land and the armies that guarded them. Aquitaine, a rich and prosperous region in the southwest of France, was one of the jewels of the continent. Known for its flourishing arts and culture, it was a beacon of wealth and sophistication. At the heart of this grand duchy stood Eleanor, poised to become more than just the Duchess of Aquitaine. Her sharp intellect, wit, and unyielding willpower allowed her to step beyond the boundaries imposed on women of her time. Eleanor's legacy cannot be overstated. As one of the most powerful women of the medieval period, she reigned as queen over both France and England. Her sons, Richard the Lionheart and King John, would inherit thrones shaped by her influence, but her power extended far beyond the royal bloodline. A patron of the arts and a champion of the courtly love movement, Eleanor's presence was felt not just in politics, but in the culture of the age. Historian Alison Weir once wrote, "Eleanor's political and cultural influence far surpassed that of most women of her era, shaping the destinies of two nations." Indeed, Eleanor was more than a queen. She was a maker of kings and an architect of the cultural renaissance that swept through her courts. Through the coming moments, we will explore Eleanor's extraordinary roles, from leading the charge during the Crusades to navigating the perilous waters of royal marriages. Her life was a tapestry of power, strategy, and resilience. Eleanor of Aquitaine was a queen who broke the mould, forging a path for herself where few others dared. But before she became this iconic figure, she was just a girl, born into privilege, yet facing challenges that would shape her rise to power. Her journey begins in the noble courts of Aquitaine, where her early life and rise to power laid the foundation for the monumental figure she would become. Eleanor of Aquitaine's story begins in 1122, in a world where noble birth dictated one's destiny and power was passed through bloodlines. She was born into one of the wealthiest, most influential families in Europe, the daughter of William X, Duke of Aquitaine, and Eleanor de Châtellerault. Aquitaine, located in the southwest of what is now France, was not just expansive in its territory, it was a cultural and intellectual hub, known for its wealth, refinement, and sophisticated court life. In this world, Eleanor was raised not merely to be a wife or a figurehead, but a leader. From the very beginning, she was groomed to hold power in a way few women of her time could. Her upbringing was also absorbing the intricacies of governance, politics, and diplomacy. Aquitaine itself was a beacon of culture and sophistication, a region where the troubadours sang of courtly love, where poets and scholars thrived, and where art and governance went hand in hand. The court of Aquitaine was a dynamic place, pulsing with creativity and intellectual vigour, and Eleanor grew up at the very heart of this. She was surrounded by the finest minds of the day, and this exposure helped shape her into a woman who could navigate both the beauty of the arts and the complexities of power. In a world dominated by men, Eleanor was uniquely positioned to be more than just an accessory to the throne. She was a woman of action, destined to shape the course of history. From a young age, she demonstrated an astute understanding of her environment, soaking in the lessons of leadership, diplomacy, and the delicate dance of power. Unlike many women of her time, Eleanor's education was remarkable, a testament to the progressive ideals of her father, William X. While noble women of the 12th century were typically trained in domestic duties and marriage preparation, Eleanor's education was far more expansive. Her father believed in the power of knowledge and ensured that she was trained in governance, military strategy, and administration. It was a rare gift for a young woman in a medieval world that largely relegated women to the private sphere. Ralph V. Turner, a historian of Eleanor's life, once noted, "From an early age, Eleanor was schooled in both governance and the arts, a testament to her family's liberal outlook on female education." This education would serve her well as she moved into the world of politics, a world where women were often underestimated and overlooked. But tragedy struck when Eleanor was just 15 years old. In 1137, her father died suddenly, leaving her as the sole heir to the Duchy of Aquitaine, one of the largest and wealthiest territories in Europe. Overnight, Eleanor became the most eligible heiress on the continent. Her inheritance was vast, not only in terms of land, but in wealth and cultural significance. Aquitaine was a jewel of Europe, coveted by kings and lords alike. Eleanor's future now held immense political weight, for whoever married her would control not just her person, but her vast territories. The eyes of Europe were upon her, and her future marriage would tip the balance of power in whichever direction she chose. It wasn't long before suitors from across Europe sought her hand, but the match that would define her early life came swiftly. That same year, Eleanor married Louis VII, the soon-to-be King of France. This union was a political masterstroke, one that not only brought Aquitaine under French control, but also solidified France's power in Europe. However, while the marriage may have been beneficial for the kingdom, it was far from harmonious for Eleanor herself. Eleanor was a free-spirited and independent young woman, raised in the vibrant cosmopolitan court of Aquitaine, where art, culture, and freedom of thought were celebrated. The French court, on the other hand, was cold, formal, dominated by a strict adherence to religious piety. Louis VII, deeply devout and committed to the ascetic practices of his faith, was in many ways the polar opposite of his new wife. Where Eleanor loved art and culture, Louis was focused on religious devotion and the simplicity of life. Their marriage was not a meeting of hearts, but a political alliance, and the differences between them became painfully obvious as time wore on. The French court stifled Eleanor's vibrant personality, and her independent spirit quickly found itself at odds with the rigid and austere nature of Louis's rule. Marion Mead, in her biography of Eleanor, wrote, "The marriage was as much a political alliance as a personal union. Yet Eleanor quickly found herself constrained by Louis's piety and the rigid French court. In a setting where she was expected to conform, Eleanor struggled to find her place. Nevertheless, Eleanor played the role of queen with grace and dignity. She joined Louis on royal tours and participated in diplomatic missions, and in 1147 she even accompanied him on the Second Crusade. This journey, intended to reclaim the Holy Land, would put an immense strain on their already fragile relationship. Eleanor's experience on the Crusade highlighted the deep differences between them and ultimately pushed their marriage to the breaking point. The Crusade tested her patience, her resolve, and her marriage. But this was only the beginning of Eleanor's rise. Though her role as Queen of France would come to an end, her story was far from over. She would soon move beyond the constraints of the French throne and step into a new chapter of her life, one that would see her become one of the most powerful and influential women in medieval Europe. As her marriage to Louis VII began to crumble under the strain of their differences, Eleanor's ambitions would lead her toward a new chapter, one that would see her exchange the crown of France for an even greater realm, and a new husband who would change her life forever. As Queen of France, Eleanor of Aquitaine found herself transported into a world vastly different from the vibrant artistic courts of her youth in Aquitaine. The French monarchy, ruled by a deeply religious Louis VII, was an institution defined by its austerity, its rigid protocols, and a strong devotion to the church. Eleanor, who had grown up in a realm where culture, art, and intellectual debates flourished, was now thrust into a life that stifled her spirit. Her marriage to Louis was never one of love, but of political necessity, designed to solidify France's hold over the vast and prosperous lands of Aquitaine. However, while this union might have strengthened France's territorial power, it became increasingly clear that it did little to bridge the personal chasm between Eleanor's free-spirited nature and Louis's devout, restrained outlook. Eleanor's independent and dynamic personality quickly became apparent at the French court. Used to the lively debates, freedom of thought, and decision-making that had characterized her upbringing in Aquitaine, she found herself confined in an environment where her role was limited. Her influence as queen consort independent spirit, which often clashed with the restrained expectations of a queen. Eleanor's ambition, sharp intellect, and desire for a larger role in governance clashed with the narrow expectations of the French court, where women were expected to be seen and not heard. Louis, though well-meaning, was ill-equipped to meet her halfway, and as the years passed, the couple grew more and more distant. Despite the confines of her role, Eleanor was never content to be a passive figurehead. She refused to fade into the background, asserting her presence in bold and unexpected ways. In 1147, when Louis embarked on the Second Crusade, Eleanor seized the opportunity to break free from the stifling court life and join him on this daring expedition. But her role was anything but traditional. While queens often accompanied their husbands on such ventures, Eleanor took an active and daring part in the journey, leading a group of women known as the Amazons, an act that defied the traditional gender roles of the time. Her presence on the battlefield shocked many, marking her as a woman unafraid to challenge expectations. In the midst of a world dominated by men, Eleanor made it clear that she was no mere consort, but a participant, determined to leave her mark. Her involvement in the Crusade not only reflected her thirst for adventure, but also her desire for political engagement, an ambition that would grow stronger as her life progressed. Yet the Crusade, meant to unite Christendom against its enemies, also revealed the deep cracks in Eleanor's marriage. The journey was fraught with challenges, both personal and political. While Louis was focused on his religious mission, Eleanor became closely connected with her uncle, Raymond of Antioch, with whom she shared a deep bond. Their relationship, though likely innocent, stirred rumours that eventually led to whispers of an affair. These accusations, whether true or not, further strained the already fragile relationship between Eleanor and Louis. Ralphie Turner noted, Eleanor's enthusiasm for the Crusade marked her as a unique and influential participant, though her actions sparked controversy. The tensions between her and Louis, exacerbated by their differences in personality and priorities, reached a breaking point during the Crusade, as the couple grew increasingly estranged. Eleanor's bold actions during the Crusade, her leadership, her alliance with her uncle, and her willingness to defy traditional roles stood in sharp contrast to Louis's reserved, pious nature. While Eleanor sought excitement, travel, and political engagement, Louis was more concerned with the religious implications of their journey. The differences that had once been subtle now became impossible to ignore. Marion Mead writes, Louis's devout nature could not contain Eleanor's thirst for excitement, travel, and political engagement. What was meant to be a unifying mission revealed just how far apart the royal couple had drifted. By the time they returned to France, it was clear that their marriage was unravelling, their divergent personalities proving too great a rift to bridge. The failure of the Crusade only deepened the chasm between them. While political alliance that had once held them together was no longer enough. In 1152, their marriage was officially annulled, with the church citing consanguinity, the fact that they were too closely related by blood, as the reason. But the truth was far more complex. Eleanor's desire for autonomy, her thirst for a life beyond the confines of the French court, and Louis's inability to meet her on equal ground had doomed their marriage. The annulment marked the end of her time as Queen of France, but it also signalled a new beginning for Eleanor, a turning point that would lead her to even greater power and freedom. The end of her marriage to Louis was not the end of Eleanor's story. In fact, it was only the beginning of her next chapter. Freed from the constraints of the French court, she was now one of the wealthiest and most powerful women in Europe, and she was determined to shape her own destiny. Eleanor was no longer content to wield power from the shadows. She wanted more freedom, more control, and more influence. Her path soon led her to Henry Plantagenet, the Duke of Normandy, a young man as ambitious as she was. Their union would not only change the course of Eleanor's life, but also the history of England. Eleanor's marriage to Henry Plantagenet was a whirlwind of passion, politics, and power. After her annulment from Louis, she wasted no time securing her future, marrying Henry just months after parting ways with the French king. Their union was electric. Henry was young, ambitious, and destined for greatness, while Eleanor brought with her the vast and wealthy lands of Aquitaine, along with her formidable political skills. Together they formed one of the most powerful couples of their time. But while their marriage began in a blaze of mutual passion and shared ambition, it would soon turn into a battlefield of clashing wills, as both Eleanor and Henry were too strong-willed to easily share power. This second marriage was not just a personal match, it was a political masterstroke. Henry, then a duke, ascended to the throne as Henry II of England just 2 years after their wedding, making Eleanor queen once more. But this time her role was different. Eleanor was no longer a consort in name only. She was a partner in power. Henry's vast territories stretched across England, Normandy, and beyond, creating an empire often referred to as the Angevin Empire. Eleanor, ever ambitious, was not content to simply be a queen in name. She ruled Aquitaine with authority, governing her lands, while Henry focused on his northern territories. Ralph V. Turner writes, "She was not a mere consort. Eleanor wielded real power, especially in Aquitaine, where she continued to rule in Henry's name." In a world where queens were often expected to fade into the background, Eleanor stood out as a capable and powerful leader. The early years of their marriage were marked by mutual respect and a shared vision of building an empire. However, the qualities that had drawn them together, Eleanor's independence and Henry's ambition, soon became sources of conflict. Both were fiercely independent and strong-willed, and as the years passed, their marriage grew strained. Eleanor, used to power found herself increasingly at odds with Henry, who sought to control every aspect of his empire. Alison Weir captured the essence of their tumultuous relationship, writing, "Eleanor's second marriage was a union of fiery equals, but it was also fraught with strife and rebellion. As the years passed, the cracks in their marriage deepened, particularly as their family grew. Eleanor bore Henry 8 children, including the future kings, Richard the Lionheart and John. While Eleanor poured her energy into raising and guiding her children, Henry's infidelity and his desire to control all aspects of their empire created further tension. Their once united front began to crumble as power plays and betrayals plagued their relationship. Eleanor's children, particularly Richard, remained fiercely loyal to her, while Henry's attempts to dominate his sons only led to resentment. The real breaking point came in 1173, when Eleanor made a decision that would change the course of her life and that of the English crown forever. Frustrated by Henry's treatment of their sons, Eleanor threw her support behind a rebellion against her husband. The revolt, led by her sons Richard and Henry the Younger, was a direct challenge to Henry's authority. Eleanor's involvement in the uprising was bold, but it was also deeply personal. She believed her sons deserved to inherit their rightful lands and titles, and she saw the revolt as a way to secure their futures. But the rebellion failed, and the price Eleanor paid was steep. In the aftermath of the rebellion, Henry's wrath was swift and unforgiving. Eleanor, once his queen and partner, was now a prisoner. She was placed under house arrest, confined to various castles across England for over a decade. Marion Mead reflects on this painful chapter in Eleanor's life. For over a decade, Eleanor was kept under house arrest, a poignant reminder of the price of rebellion against a king. The queen who had once ruled vast territories, who had led armies and guided nations, now found herself in isolation, her movements restricted and her voice silenced. But Eleanor was not a woman easily broken. Though she spent years in confinement, she never lost her spirit or her influence. Even from within the walls of her prison, she continued to communicate with her sons, offering advice and encouragement. Richard, in particular, remained devoted to his mother, and it was through his eventual rise to the throne that Eleanor's fortunes would change. In 1189, when Henry II died and Richard ascended the throne as Richard I, one of his first acts as king was to release his mother from her long imprisonment. Eleanor, now in her late 60s, returned to power with all the vigour and determination of her youth. She became a key advisor to Richard, guiding him as he prepared for the Third Crusade and managing the kingdom in his absence. Once again, Eleanor proved that she was not a queen content to remain in the background. She travelled across Europe, arranging alliances, negotiating treaties, and even securing Richard's release when he was captured during his return from the Crusade. For Eleanor, her role as queen did not end with her imprisonment. It only evolved. Her resilience in the face of adversity, ability to navigate the complex politics of the time made her one of the most remarkable queens in English history. Eleanor's legacy as Queen of England is one of strength, resilience, and defiance. She was a woman who refused to be confined by the expectations of her time, whether by her husband, her sons, or her circumstances. Her reign was marked by both triumph and tragedy, but through it all, Eleanor remained a formidable force in the world of medieval politics. While Eleanor's political achievements are well known, her influence extended beyond the throne. As queen, she became a patron of the arts, a supporter of poets, and a central figure in the courtly love movement, a cultural force that would leave an enduring mark on European literature and society. Her role as a queen was only one facet of her incredible life, and her passion for the arts would shape her legacy in profound and lasting ways. Eleanor of Aquitaine was not just a queen who wielded political power, she was also a patron of culture, a woman whose influence reshaped the very ideals of love, chivalry, and courtly behaviour in medieval Europe. In her courts at Aquitaine and Poitiers, Eleanor fostered an environment where the arts flourished and where the ideals of courtly love, a romanticised view of love and chivalry, took root. The 12th century was an age when power was often defined by the sword, but in Eleanor's world, the heart and the mind were equally prized. She became the centrepiece of a cultural revolution that transformed the aristocracy, influencing poets, musicians, and the very notion of knighthood. One of the most famous figures associated with Eleanor's court was Bernard de Ventadour, a troubadour who praised her beauty, grace, and wit. His lyrical compositions, filled with adoration and longing, encapsulated the ideals of courtly love, an elaborate code of conduct that elevated romantic devotion to a near sacred level. Eleanor herself became a symbol of this ideal, a queen whose influence went far beyond the battlefield or the throne room. Her courts became gathering places for poets, musicians, and noblemen, all drawn to the sophistication and culture that Eleanor championed. Amy Kelly, in Eleanor of Aquitaine and the Four Kings, notes, Eleanor's court was a cultural beacon in Europe, shaping the ideals of chivalry and courtly love that would define the medieval aristocracy. In this way, Eleanor's influence extended far beyond politics. She helped to define the very soul of the medieval knight. An important aspect of Eleanor's cultural influence is her supposed establishment of the courts of love in Poitiers. These courts, if the stories are to be believed, were presided over by Eleanor and other noble ladies who deliberated on matters of love, chivalry, and knightly behaviour. It is said that these courts debated questions like whether love could truly exist within marriage, or how a knight should best demonstrate his devotion to his lady. These courts may have been more myth than reality, embellished by later chroniclers eager to romanticise Eleanor's legacy. Yet their very existence in the popular imagination speaks to the enduring she had on the culture of her time. Elizabeth A.R. Brown, in the world of Eleanor of Aquitaine, reflects on this fascinating legend, though likely exaggerated by later chroniclers. Eleanor's association with the courts of love solidified her reputation as a cultural trailblazer. Whether or not the courts existed as described, Eleanor's influence on the ideals of love and chivalry is undeniable. She encouraged the creation of a cultural ethos that placed women at the centre of noble pursuits, elevating them as muses and arbiters of knightly conduct. In her world, love was not just a personal affair, it was a form of art, one that required devotion, loyalty, and poetic expression. Eleanor's legacy in the realm of culture was as powerful as her impact on politics. She did not simply rule, she inspired. Her court became a place where the ideals of knighthood were refined, where poets found their voices, and where the stories of love and valour that we still associate with the medieval period were born. Her patronage of the arts was not an indulgence, it was an assertion of her belief in the power of beauty, intellect, and the human heart. As Eleanor aged, her life would take yet another dramatic turn. The years of rebellion and imprisonment were behind her, but her role as a mother to kings and as a queen in her own right was far from over. Eleanor's later life was defined by her indomitable spirit, a woman who, even in her twilight years, continued to shape the course of history. Eleanor of Aquitaine's later years were no less remarkable than her tumultuous youth. After the death of Henry II in 1189, she was released from captivity, a decade-long confinement that had tested her resilience but never broke her spirit. At nearly 70 years old, Eleanor emerged into the political spotlight once again, proving that age was no obstacle to her ambition or influence. She immediately set to work securing the throne for her favourite son, Richard the Lionheart, who would become one of England's most legendary kings. It was Eleanor's wisdom and political acumen that ensured Richard's smooth succession. In a world where power was often precarious, she was the steady hand that guided her son's ascent. Though Richard was the king, it was Eleanor who effectively managed the kingdom in his absence. When Richard left for the Third Crusade shortly after his coronation, he entrusted the reins of the realm to his mother. Far from retreating into a ceremonial role, Eleanor was deeply involved in the governance of England. Alison Weir captures this vividly. Eleanor, now in her 70s, was far from politically retired. She was the true force behind Richard's government. From her seat of power, Eleanor managed the affairs of the Angevin Empire, navigating the dangerous waters of medieval politics with the same skill and precision that had defined her earlier years. But her most dramatic role during Richard's reign came after he was captured by Duke Leopold of Austria on his return from the Crusade. News of Richard's imprisonment sent shockwaves through Europe, and it was Eleanor who took on the Herculean task of securing his release. At an retired from public life, Eleanor embarked on a journey across Europe, negotiating with monarchs, raising the enormous ransom required, and ensuring her son's safe return. It was a testament to her enduring strength and diplomatic prowess. In the face of enormous odds, Eleanor succeeded, proving once again that she was more than just a queen. She was a force of nature. Eleanor's travels during this period were remarkable not only for their scope, but for the personal risks she took. Crossing Europe at such an advanced age, she met with kings and emperors, brokered deals, and navigated complex political relationships, all to secure her son's freedom. Her relentless determination in the face of adversity exemplified the extraordinary lengths to which she was willing to go to protect her family and safeguard the future of the Plantagenet dynasty. Her actions during this time were nothing short of heroic, solidifying her legacy as a woman of unmatched strength and vision. After Richard's return and his eventual death in 1199, Eleanor's influence continued through her youngest son, John. Though their relationship was complex, with moments of tension and conflict, Eleanor remained a guiding force in his life. She recognised John's potential and sought to ensure his success as king, just as she had for Richard. Even in her 80s, Eleanor played a critical role in the politics of the realm, advising John and offering her insights on matters of state. She travelled to France to secure his position, engaging in diplomatic negotiations with the same vigour that had characterised her earlier years. Ralph B. Turner, in Eleanor of Aquitaine, Queen of France, Queen of England, writes, "Even in her final years, Eleanor was a force to be reckoned with, ensuring the Plantagenet dynasty's survival. Her presence was a stabilising force during John's turbulent reign, as she worked tirelessly to protect her family's legacy. Though frail in body, her mind remained sharp, and her influence over English politics was undeniable. Eleanor's later life was a testament to her enduring strength, both as a mother and as a queen. She had survived rebellions, imprisonment, and the deaths of many loved ones, but her indomitable spirit never wavered. In her final years, she retired to the Abbey of Fontevraud, where she sought a measure of peace after decades of political struggle. Yet, even in retirement, her legacy was secure. She had shaped the course of two of Europe's greatest kingdoms and left an indelible mark on history. As she approached the end of her life, Eleanor's thoughts must have turned to the future. She had fought so hard to secure the success of her sons and the continuation of the Plantagenet line. In many ways, her entire life had been a testament to the idea that power and influence were not bound by gender or age. She had defied the expectations of her time and crafted a legacy that would endure for centuries. But even as she withdrew from the public stage, Eleanor's legacy was far from complete, for her influence would echo through the ages, shaping the destiny of kings and the fabric of European history. Eleanor of Aquitaine's life was nothing short of extraordinary. almost any woman of her time. Her life was marked by moments of intense political strategy, cultural transformation, and personal rebellion. She was a queen who defied the limitations placed on her by a male-dominated world and carved out a legacy that still resonates today. As historian Marion Mead aptly put it, few women in history can claim such an indelible mark on both politics and culture as Eleanor of Aquitaine. Eleanor's impact on medieval Europe stretched far beyond the politics of her time. She championed the arts, fostering the courtly love movement that would define chivalry for centuries. Her courts were filled with poets, musicians, and troubadours, and she inspired the creation of legends that would echo throughout European literature. But it was her political acumen, her unyielding resolve, and her ability to navigate the turbulent waters of medieval kingship that truly set her apart. She was a queen who refused to fade into the background, even when confined or oppressed. Instead, she adapted, grew stronger, and emerged as a defining figure in European history. Perhaps her greatest legacy lies in her role as a mother to kings. Richard the Lionheart, the warrior king who would become one of England's most celebrated rulers, owed much of his success to Eleanor's guidance. Likewise, her youngest son, King John, though remembered for his troubled reign, was a direct product of Eleanor's tenacity and political manoeuvring. Through her sons, Eleanor's bloodline would continue to shape the course of European history. As Alison Weir noted, Eleanor's descendants continued to shape European politics for centuries, cementing her place in history. Her grandchildren would marry into royal families across the continent, spreading her influence far and wide. Eleanor's legacy is not simply one of power, but of resilience. She lived through betrayals, rebellions, imprisonment, and personal loss, yet she never allowed herself to be defeated. She was a woman of immense complexity, one who could be both loving and ruthless, both nurturing and politically shrewd. Her ability to adapt to the ever-changing political landscape, to rise above the expectations of her gender, and to continue shaping the world even in her twilight years, is a testament to her extraordinary character. As we reflect on Eleanor's life, it's clear that she was more than just a queen. She was a cultural and political pioneer, a mother of kings, and a woman whose spirit refused to be broken. Her legacy endures, not just in the annals of history, but in the ideals of leadership, resilience, and ambition that she embodied. If you enjoyed this journey into the life of Eleanor of Aquitaine, remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the ASMR History Hub. Together, we will continue exploring the captivating lives of history's most fascinating figures, journeying through stories that will both relax and inspire. I hope that this video has relaxed you